The rain poured relentlessly over the city's cracked sidewalks, turning the streets into rivers of gray and brown. The wind tugged at the loose plastic bags and scattered papers that clung to the gutters, while the dull hum of distant traffic was muffled by the thick blanket of clouds overhead. In the heart of a struggling neighborhood where buildings leaned wearily and paint peeled like old scabs, a young woman named Lara walked briskly, her thin jacket offering little protection against the chill that seeped through her bones. Each step echoed against the empty storefronts, their windows boarded or fogged with grime, reflecting the same bleakness she felt pressing down on her. Lara's mind swirled with a heavy mixture of fear and uncertainty. Just hours ago, she had been handed an envelope that sealed her fate, a termination notice from the small cafe where she had worked for almost 2 years. The official reason was downsizing. But the sharp look in her manager's eyes told a different story, one of silent judgment and quiet dismissal. She had stumbled out of the building, clutching her belongings like a fragile thread, and fighting back tears that blurred the rain-streaked streets. Now, with no job and an unplanned pregnancy growing inside her, Lara felt the weight of the world press against every breath. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Her hand instinctively pressed against the curve of her belly, a small but persistent reminder of the life taking shape within her. A life she was not yet ready to face, but could no longer deny. The city around her seemed indifferent, the worn bricks and cracked pavement echoing the fractures inside her heart. She had nowhere to go. Her tiny apartment lease was up, and the landlord's parting words had been blunt. No extensions, no second chances. Friends had drifted away, overwhelmed by their own struggles. The thought of returning to an empty room, cold and silent, was unbearable. As she walked toward the outskirts of the neighborhood, the rain began to soak through her jacket, chilling her further. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles, and her breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale sharp and cold. Then, as if guided by some desperate instinct, Lara turned down a narrow alley she had passed many times but never entered. At its end stood a house, half hidden behind a thicket of overgrown weeds and a sagging gate. It was old, its windows cracked and boarded, paint faded to a ghostly white that peeled like curling leaves. The yard was littered with broken branches and piles of dead leaves, but to Lara, it looked like a sanctuary, a place to hide, to breathe, to survive. She hesitated at the gate, her fingers trembling as she pushed it open. The creak of rusted hinges echoed through the quiet alley, and the smell of damp, earth, and decaying wood filled her nose. The door to the house was slightly ajar, a dark invitation that pulled her forward. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of mildew, but it was dry, sheltered from the relentless rain. Lara stepped in carefully, the wooden floorboards groaning beneath her weight. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, but a small window let in a sliver of fading light, casting mottled patterns on the cracked plaster walls. She sank onto the threadbare sofa, pulling her knees close to her chest. The silence pressed in around her, broken only by the patter of rain against the roof. For the first time that day, Lara allowed herself to breathe. The house was a broken shell, much like her own life, neglected, forgotten, but still standing. She traced a finger along the torn fabric of the couch, feeling the rough texture beneath her skin. And for a moment, the weight of her troubles seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile thread of hope. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the house, Lara found a quiet refuge. The world beyond the walls might be harsh and unyielding, but here she could gather her strength. She pressed her hand again to her belly, feeling the faint flutter of life stirring within her. It was a reminder that despite everything, there was still a future to fight for, even if that future was uncertain and fraught with fear. The rain's rhythm slowed, and the clouds began to part just enough for a pale light to seep through the windows. Lara stood and moved toward the kitchen, where a rusted sink and cracked counter sat, remnants of a time when this house had been full of laughter and warmth. She found a bottle of water left behind on the counter, rinsed out the dust from a chipped cup, and took a small sip. The water was cold but cleansing, washing away some of the grime and exhaustion clinging to her throat. As the evening crept closer, the house whispered stories in its silence. Faded wallpaper curled at the edges, revealing layers of time beneath. A broken photograph frame lay on the floor, its glass shattered, but the image inside faintly visible. A smiling woman with eyes full of hope, standing in front of a similar house. The sight tugged at Lara's heart, a silent connection to the past occupants, their lives intertwined with this forgotten place. The city's distant sounds softened as night fell. The rain had ceased, leaving the streets slick and shimmering under the glow of flickering street lamps. Lara settled in for the night, wrapping herself in a threadbare blanket she found tossed on the floor. The cold seeped through the walls, but the shelter felt like a fragile shield against the storm outside and the storm within. Her thoughts drifted, a tangle of worries and dreams. How would she face the coming days? Where would she find the strength to care for a child she barely knew? The uncertainty pressed in, but beneath it, a quiet determination began to grow. This broken house, abandoned and forgotten, was now her refuge. And perhaps, just perhaps, it could become the foundation for something new. As sleep began to pull at her, Lara whispered a promise into the quiet. She would find a way to survive, to protect the life growing inside her, and to rebuild from the ruins. The rain had driven her here, but it would not define her. In the heart of a bleak and unforgiving city, in a house that had seen better days, Lara took her first step toward a future she dared to hope for. The morning light seeped cautiously through the grimy windows, casting a pale glow across the room where Lara had spent the night. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and dust, mingling with the faint traces of something long forgotten. Old books, dried flowers, and a whisper of memories embedded in the cracked walls. Lara stirred beneath the thin blanket she had found, the chill of the night still lingering in her bones. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, feeling the soft swell of her belly beneath her worn shirt, a constant reminder of the fragile life she carried. Rising unsteadily, she stepped toward the window, wiping away years of grime with the edge of her sleeve. Outside, the neighborhood stretched out like a patchwork of faded hopes. Boarded-up houses, empty lots overrun by weeds, and the distant hum of a city that seemed to move on without her. Yet, here in this decaying shell of a house, Lara felt a quiet resistance growing inside her, a stubborn flame refusing to be extinguished. She began to explore, her footsteps tentative on the creaking wooden floor. The house was a labyrinth of shadows and broken corners, each room telling a story of neglect and abandonment. In the kitchen, rust had claimed the sink, and cracked tiles lay beneath years of grime. Cobwebs stretched like fragile lace in the corners, and the faint light revealed peeling wallpaper curled like autumn leaves. As she moved through the rooms, Lara's fingers brushed over remnants of the past. A cracked teacup on the windowsill, a faded curtain swaying softly in the breeze, a scattering of yellowed papers on the floor. Each artifact spoke of lives once lived here. Lives that had faded but left traces behind. The silence was both oppressive and comforting, a space where she could confront her fears without judgment. In the living room, a collapsed bookshelf leaned against the wall, its shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten volumes. Lara reached down, pulling out a tattered book whose spine cracked as she opened it. The pages were brittle, filled with handwritten notes and pressed flowers, as if someone had tried to hold on to moments that time threatened to erase. She sat down amidst the dust and faded memories, letting herself be carried away by the fragile echoes of stories that mirrored her own uncertainty. Her thoughts drifted to the future, a future clouded by doubt and fear. The pregnancy, once a secret whisper in her heart, now felt like a storm gathering strength. Would she be ready to be a mother? Could she provide the warmth and safety her unborn child deserved? The loss of her job had stripped away her sense of security, leaving her adrift in a sea of unknowns. Yet, as she traced the delicate veins of a pressed flower nestled between the pages, a flicker of determination took root. Lara decided to clean what she could, starting with the small kitchen table that stood crooked in the corner. She fetched a rag from a drawer, its fabric thin but serviceable, and began wiping away layers of dust and grime. Each stroke was an act of defiance, a promise to herself that she would not surrender to the decay surrounding her. The house, much like her life, was broken but salvageable. Hours passed as she moved through the rooms, gathering loose boards and propping up a sagging doorframe. Her movements were slow but purposeful, each repair a small victory against the overwhelming odds. With every nail hammered and every surface scrubbed, the house seemed to respond, shedding its cloak of neglect to reveal glimpses of warmth beneath. Despite her fatigue, Lara found solace in this labor. It was as if the act of restoring the house mirrored the work she needed to do within herself. The walls that had once felt like barriers slowly transformed into a sanctuary, a place where hope could take root amid the ruins. She imagined the laughter of a child echoing through the halls, the scent of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, the gentle hum of life reclaiming its space. As evening approached, Lara sat by the window, watching the fading light cast long shadows across the neighborhood. Her fingers traced the outline of her belly, feeling the faint flutter of life stirring within. The doubts that had plagued her earlier softened, replaced by a quiet resolve. She was not alone, not anymore. This broken house had become a refuge, a starting point for rebuilding not just a home, but a life. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the small acts of courage unfolding within the cracked walls. But inside, Lara nurtured a fragile hope, a belief that even in the darkest places, growth was possible. The house, battered and bruised, was beginning to breathe again, and with it, so was she. As night fell, the shadows deepened, but Lara felt a newfound strength rising with the darkness. She wrapped the thin blanket around her shoulders and settled onto the worn sofa, the remnants of the day's work surrounding her like a shield. The house was still far from whole, but it was hers now, a place to heal, to dream, and to prepare for the journey ahead. In the quiet, she whispered a promise to herself and the life within, to face the fears, to embrace the uncertainty, and to find beauty in the broken. The dawn would come again, bringing with it the chance to rebuild, to nurture, to hope. And in that promise, Lara found the courage to keep moving forward. Days bled into one another as Lara settled into a hesitant rhythm within the fractured walls of the old house. The initial shock of her circumstances had dulled, replaced by a cautious resolve to carve out a space where she and the life growing inside her could survive. Morning light filtered through the cracked windows, painting the peeling wallpaper in muted golds and grays, while the distant city noises wove a familiar, if indifferent, soundtrack to her solitude. One afternoon, while sifting through a pile of scattered papers that had gathered near the fireplace, Lara's fingers brushed against a weathered leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked and faded, the edges worn soft by years of handling. Curious, she opened it carefully, the delicate pages releasing a faint scent of aged paper and ink. The handwriting inside was neat, but hurried, the ink blotting in places as if the writer had been overcome by emotion while recording their thoughts. As she read, Lara discovered the story of a woman named Evelyn, who had once called this very house home. Evelyn's words unfolded a tapestry of hope and hardship. A young mother grappling with loss, dreams deferred, and the fierce desire to protect her child against the odds. The journal chronicled quiet days spent tending a small garden, moments of laughter shared with neighbors, and nights haunted by fears not unlike Lara's own. Each entry was a window into a life shaped by struggle, but illuminated by resilience. Evelyn's voice wove through the pages, speaking of the house not as a relic, but as a living entity, wounded but capable of healing. As Lara turned the fragile pages, she felt an unexpected kinship, a bridge spanning decades and hardships, linking two women bound by circumstance and the shared hope for a better tomorrow. The discovery stirred something deep within Lara, a mixture of empathy and inspiration. Evelyn's struggles mirrored her own in uncanny ways, and the journal became a companion in the silence, a source of strength when the loneliness threatened to overwhelm. She read late into the evening, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, the woman's words a balm for her weary spirit. Motivated by Evelyn's determination, Lara began to imagine the house not as a tomb of memories, but as a cradle for new beginnings. She traced the faded sketches of a garden Evelyn had planned, envisioning what could grow from the neglected soil just beyond the porch. The thought of nurturing life, both within her and around her, sparked a fragile hope that took root alongside fear. Days turned to weeks as Lara's resolve deepened. She gathered scraps of wood and discarded tools she found nearby, slowly repairing broken window frames and patching holes in the walls with a mixture of plaster and determination. Her hands, once trembling with uncertainty, grew steadier with each act of restoration. The house, once a silent witness to despair, began to breathe again under her care. Amid the repairs, Lara faced the growing reality of motherhood. She wrestled with fears of inadequacy and the daunting responsibility ahead. The journal's pages offered not only solace, but practical wisdom. Notes on herbal remedies, recipes for simple meals, and reminders to seek kindness in unexpected places. Evelyn's words guided Lara through sleepless nights and moments of doubt, reminding her that strength often came in small, quiet acts of love. One afternoon, while clearing debris from the backyard, Lara uncovered a patch of earth where wildflowers had once bloomed. Using a handful of seeds found in a cracked tin box tucked inside the journal, she began to plant a modest garden. Each seed placed in the soil was a silent vow, to nurture growth, to reclaim beauty from neglect, to forge a future against the harshness of the world outside. The garden became a sanctuary, a tangible symbol of Lara's burgeoning hope. As tiny shoots pushed through the dirt, she felt a kinship with Evelyn, two women separated by time but united by the soil beneath their feet. The house, the garden, and the life within her were intertwined, each fragile yet fiercely alive. Neighbors, once distant figures glimpsed through rain-streaked windows, began to notice the subtle changes. An elderly man paused to offer a nod of approval. A young mother smiled from across the street. The invisible threads of community, once frayed and broken, tentatively rewove themselves around Lara's fragile world. With each passing day, Lara's fears did not disappear, but they were tempered by purpose. She cleaned the floors, mended torn curtains, and lit candles in the evenings, transforming the house into a home that whispered of resilience rather than defeat. The journal lay open on the kitchen table, a constant reminder that even in the darkest places, hope could take root and flourish. As the weeks unfolded, Lara's connection to the house deepened. She began to speak aloud to the shadows, sharing her hopes and fears as if the walls themselves could listen and answer. The silence, once oppressive, now felt like a canvas on which she painted dreams of safe nights, warm meals, and a child's laughter echoing through these rooms. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky blushed with fading light, Lara sat by the window, cradling her swollen belly. The garden outside was a patchwork of green shoots and fragile buds, tentative signs of life pushing through the earth. She traced the lines of Evelyn's sketches once more, imagining the garden in full bloom, a testament to survival and renewal. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the fragile beauty of growth and memories, Lara felt a shift within herself. The weight of uncertainty remained, but it was balanced by a growing strength, a belief that she could not only endure, but thrive. Evelyn's story had become her own, a shared journey through fear and hope, loss and love. The house, once a refuge from a storm, was transforming into a beacon of possibility. Each repaired board, each planted seed, each whispered promise was a step toward a future where Lara and her child might find safety and belonging. The past and present intertwined, weaving a narrative of resilience that stretched beyond the broken wall. As night settled over the neighborhood, Lara closed the journal gently and placed it on the bedside table. She lay back against the worn pillow, the soft rhythm of her breathing mingling with the distant sounds of the city. The house held her, imperfect and scarred, but alive, cradling her hopes as tenderly as she cradled the life within. Tomorrow awaited with all its uncertainties, but tonight, in the fragile glow of candlelight and memory, Lara found a quiet peace. The journey ahead was daunting, but she was no longer walking it alone. The echoes of a woman from another time whispered strength into her heart. And with that, Lara dared to dream of a future where hope could bloom, even in the most unlikely places. The days grew shorter, and with the fading light came a creeping chill that seeped through the thin walls of the house. Lara found herself battling new challenges. The fragile sanctuary she had begun to build, now tested by the harsh realities of her situation. Her body, once lithe and resilient, now felt heavy and unsteady. Each movement a reminder of the life growing inside her and the toll it was beginning to take. Food had become scarce. The small savings she had clung to were dwindling rapidly, and the neighborhood's limited resources stretched thin for everyone. Lara found herself scavenging through forgotten corners of nearby markets, picking through discounted produce, and relying on the generosity of strangers when she could find it. Yet, hunger gnawed at her relentlessly, a physical ache that mirrored the anxiety knotting inside her. One afternoon, as she sat on the cracked steps of the porch, she clutched her belly and fought a wave of dizziness that blurred the edges of her vision. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and the world tilted precariously. The exhaustion was more than fatigue. It was a warning, She knew she needed help, but pride and fear tangled within her, making the idea of reaching out feel like an insurmountable barrier. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she lost her job, the unfairness of it still vivid. The cafe had been a small refuge, a place where she had felt seen and valued, if only briefly. Yet when the company announced downsizing, she was one of the first to go. No explanation, just a curt apology and a severed connection to the stability she had counted on. The experience left a bitter taste, a sense of injustice that lingered beneath her growing worries. Despite the hardships, Lara's determination remained unbroken. She continued to patch the house, fortifying the fragile walls against the encroaching cold. But some repairs required materials beyond her reach, and the house's creaks and groans grew louder with each passing night, echoing the vulnerability she felt inside. One evening, while walking through the neighborhood in search of anything edible, Lara noticed a bulletin board outside the community center. Among the faded flyers and peeling posters, a brightly colored notice caught her eye. A support group for pregnant women in need, offering prenatal care, counseling, and assistance with food and shelter. Her heart quickened, a mixture of hope and hesitation swirling within her. The next day, summoning every ounce of courage, Lara made her way to the address on the flyer. The community center was a modest brick building, its walls adorned with murals painted by local children. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the murmur of conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the silence she had lived with. A woman behind the desk greeted her with a smile, gentle and understanding. Lara hesitated, then shared her story in halting words, the weight of shame and fear lifting slightly as she spoke. The woman listened without judgment and offered resources, appointments with a midwife, food vouchers, and connections to social workers who could help with housing. It was the first time in weeks that Lara felt the possibility of support, a lifeline extended in the midst of her isolation. Returning to the house that evening, Lara carried a small bag of donated groceries and a flyer with her prenatal appointment. The act of accepting help was unfamiliar but necessary, a step toward reclaiming control over her life. She placed the food carefully on the kitchen table, the sight of fresh vegetables and bread a balm to her weary spirit. Yet, the house still bore its scars. A particularly fierce windstorm swept through the neighborhood one night, rattling the fragile windows and loosening already weakened boards. Lara woke to the sound of a leak dripping steadily onto the floor, the cold water pooling near her makeshift bed. She scrambled to block the draft with whatever she could find. A torn blanket, a piece of scrap wood, her hands trembling but determined not to succumb. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within. Lara felt vulnerable, exposed to forces beyond her control. Yet she refused to let them break her. The house was more than shelter. It was a symbol of her fight to protect herself and the unborn child she carried. Every patch, every repair, was an act of defiance against the despair threatening to engulf her. In the quiet moments between storms and struggles, Lara found solace in small routines. Brewing weak tea from foraged herbs, writing in a journal she had started, and tending to the garden that had begun to bloom despite the neglect. These acts grounded her, tethering her to hope even as shadows lengthened. She thought often of the woman whose journal she had found, the echoes of a shared journey reverberating through time. Evelyn's strength was a beacon, reminding Lara that resilience was born not from ease, but from enduring hardship with grace. The challenges she faced now were daunting, but they were not insurmountable. One afternoon, as Lara rested on the worn sofa, she traced the lines of a community notice pinned to the wall. a workshop on prenatal care and nutrition scheduled for the following week. The invitation felt like a stepping stone, an opportunity to prepare herself for motherhood and to connect with others walking similar paths. Though fear lingered, so did resolve. Lara knew she could not continue alone. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with obstacles she could not yet foresee. But with each small act, accepting help, seeking knowledge, mending broken walls, she was building a foundation stronger than the cracked plaster and splintered wood. As night settled, the house held its breath, sheltering a woman who refused to surrender. Lara lay awake, listening to the distant hum of the city and the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Within her, a new life fluttered, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably alive. In the face of scarcity, exhaustion, and loss, Lara's determination blazed quietly but fiercely. The road was long and the storm far from over, but she was no longer just surviving. She was fighting to reclaim her future, one small step at a time. The storm arrived without warning, a sudden fury that tore through the neighborhood with relentless force. Rain pounded against the fragile roof, seeping through cracks and pooling in dark corners. The wind howled like a wild animal, rattling the boarded windows and bending the skeletal trees that stood sentinel outside. Inside the weathered house, Lara sat huddled beneath a threadbare blanket, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. The storm was a tempest, both outside and within, a test of her resilience, a challenge to the fragile refuge she had built. As the first heavy drops began to leak through the ceiling, she moved quickly, gathering buckets and bowls, the only containers she could find, to catch the water that dripped steadily onto the floor. Each splash echoed in the cavernous room, a reminder of the house's vulnerability and her own precarious situation. The cold seeped into her bones, and fatigue pressed down like a weight. But she refused to surrender to despair. Flashbacks flickered behind her closed eyes. The moment she lost her job, the sharp words masked as corporate downsizing, the hollow feeling of rejection that had followed. That memory fueled a quiet fury, a determination not to be defeated by circumstances beyond her control. The storm outside might rage, but Lara was determined to protect the life inside her, no matter the cost. The wind shifted suddenly, sending a violent gust that slammed against the front door, threatening to tear it from its hinges. Lara moved to brace it with a heavy chair, her breath shallow and rapid, heart pounding in rhythm with the storm's rage. The house groaned and creaked, its old bones protesting the assault, but it held firm, for now. In the midst of the chaos, a sharp crack sounded. A branch snapped and crashed against the side of the house, sending a shower of debris onto the porch. Lara's eyes darted to the window, where a loose shutter banged wildly, threatening to break free. Without hesitation, she rose, weaving through the cluttered room to secure it with a length of rope she had found during her earlier repairs. Her muscles ached, and the dizziness that had haunted her in recent days whispered warnings, but she pushed them aside. The storm was a monstrous adversary, but so was she. With every knot tied and every barrier erected, Lara carved out a sanctuary within the tempest, a refuge for the fragile life she carried. Outside, as if summoned by the storm's fury, footsteps pounded on the porch, urgent and uneven. Lara's heart leapt. She wasn't alone. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw a figure silhouetted against the darkened sky. A neighbor, a woman from down the block who had once smiled and nodded in passing. Now, she stood at the threshold, soaked and shivering, offering a lifeline. The door creaked open, and the woman stepped inside, carrying a weathered umbrella and a small bag. "I saw the storm was bad," she said, voice gentle but firm. "Thought you might need some help." Lara's throat tightened. The isolation she had wrapped herself in was suddenly pierced by unexpected kindness. Together, they moved to reinforce the windows and patch the leak until it slowed to a trickle. The neighbor brought blankets and hot tea, their shared warmth a fragile shield against the storm's wrath. In the flickering candlelight, Lara felt the first flicker of hope that had nothing to do with the house's repairs. A connection to another human. A reminder that she was not entirely alone. The night stretched on, the storm gradually losing its fury as dawn approached. Outside, the world was soaked and battered. But within the house, a fragile peace settled. Lara sat close to her visitor, the weight of exhaustion pressing down, but softened by the presence beside her. As the first rays of morning filtered through the clouds, Lara's thoughts turned inward. The storm had tested her strength and the limits of her fragile sanctuary. But it had also revealed something deeper. The power of resilience and the unexpected kindness that could break through even the darkest isolation. Her journey was far from over. The house still needed repairs, her health required care, and the future remained uncertain. But in that quiet dawn, surrounded by the softened sounds of a world beginning anew, Lara found an ember of courage burning steadily within her. The storm had raged and battered, but it had not broken her. With the fragile shelter around her and the life within her, Lara resolved to face whatever came next with the fierce determination of a mother protecting her child. And the quiet strength born from the bonds of human connection. The storm had passed, leaving behind a neighborhood washed clean but scarred. Fallen branches littered the streets. Puddles shimmered beneath the weak morning sun, and the scent of wet earth hung heavy in the air. Inside the battered house, Lara sat by the window, cradling a warm cup of tea offered by her neighbor the night before. The house, though still fragile, felt different now, less like a forgotten relic and more like a sanctuary that had weathered the worst and remained standing. With the neighbor's help, Lara had managed to secure the leaks and reinforce the windows, small victories that bolstered her spirit. The woman had promised to return with information about local clinics and social services, and the thought of support no longer felt like a distant dream, but a tangible possibility. For the first time in weeks, Lara allowed herself to envision a future where she and her baby might be safe, cared for, and not entirely alone. The house, once a symbol of despair, began to transform in Lara's eyes, a testament to resilience and hope. She moved through the rooms with renewed purpose, sweeping away debris, wiping down surfaces, and arranging the sparse furniture with care. Each act was a brick laid in the foundation of a new beginning, a declaration that this place could be more than a temporary refuge. Lara's thoughts often returned to the life growing inside her. The tiny movements she felt like delicate whispers beneath her skin. The anticipation mingled with anxiety, but it also fueled a determination to seek care and prepare as best she could. The flyer from the community center lay folded on the kitchen table, a reminder of the appointment she had scheduled. A step toward nurturing not just the physical life within, but the promise of motherhood itself. That day, as sunlight filtered through the broken window panes, Lara ventured outside for the first time in days. The garden she had planted was a patchwork of green shoots and fragile buds, pushing stubbornly through the soil. Kneeling beside the sprouts, she gently tended to them, her fingers tracing the delicate leaves as if drawing strength from their quiet persistence. The garden was more than a patch of earth. It was a symbol of rebirth, a mirror of the growth unfolding within her. The neighborhood, still scarred by the storm, showed signs of life returning. Neighbors emerged from their homes, sharing greetings and helping one another clear debris. Lara found herself drawn into the small acts of community, offering a hand to carry a fallen branch, exchanging smiles and words of encouragement. The isolation that had once enveloped her began to lift, replaced by a fragile web of connection. In the days that followed, Lara attended the prenatal clinic arranged by the community center. The midwife she met was kind and patient, guiding Lara through the essentials of care and nourishment. The appointments became a source of reassurance, a place where Lara's fears were met with understanding and her questions answered with gentle expertise. She learned about the importance of nutrition, rest, and emotional support, each lesson a thread weaving safety around her and the child she awaited. Back at the house, Lara continued her work to repair and restore. The walls, once cracked and bare, now bore traces of fresh paint and carefully hung curtains scavenged from a nearby thrift store. The kitchen table, though worn, was wiped clean and set with simple dishes, the promise of meals shared and life sustained. The house was becoming a home, one shaped not by perfection, but by love and perseverance. One afternoon, as she rested in the quiet, Lara found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The loss, the fear, the moments of despair. Yet through it all, she had discovered a well of strength she had not known existed. The house, the garden, the community, and the care she now received were threads in a tapestry of survival and hope. She thought of the journal she had found, of Evelyn's words echoing through time. The connection between their stories was no longer just a comforting thought, but a tangible reality, a lineage of women who had faced hardship and chosen to nurture life anyway. Lara felt a profound gratitude for the resilience passed down, a legacy she was now part of. As evening settled over the neighborhood, Lara prepared a simple meal, the aroma of cooking filling the small kitchen with warmth. She set the table by the window, where the garden outside caught the fading light in a soft glow. Sitting down, she cradled her belly and whispered promises to the life within. To protect, to love, to build a future filled with kindness and strength. The house, once a place of shadows and silence, was now alive with possibility. It held the echoes of past sorrows, but also the pulse of new beginnings. Lara's journey was far from over, but with each passing day, she moved closer to a future where hope could flourish amid the ruins. In the quiet night, as the city's distant lights twinkled beyond the cracked windows, Lara allowed herself to dream, to imagine a life where she and her child would know safety, love, and the warmth of belonging. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was illuminated by the fragile, unwavering light of hope. As spring edged its way into the neighborhood, the air grew softer, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. The once barren garden outside Lara's house now burst with tentative green shoots and vibrant petals, a living testament to renewal. The house itself, still scarred but steadily healing, had become more than a shelter. It was a beacon of quiet resilience in a community slowly awakening from its own hardships. Lara found herself moving beyond mere survival, drawn into the subtle rhythms of connection and shared experience. One afternoon, as she tended to the garden's fledgling blossoms, a small group of women gathered hesitantly on the cracked sidewalk nearby. Mothers, expectant mothers, and those who had faced their own struggles. drawn together by a flyer Lara had quietly posted at the community center weeks before. It was an invitation to a gathering, a space for support and understanding amid the challenges pregnancy could bring. The first meeting was tentative, the women circling around mismatched chairs on Lara's patched porch. Their voices were soft at first, sharing stories tinged with fear, hope, and the weight of isolation. Lara listened, her own experiences reflected in their words, a tapestry of pain and perseverance woven through each narrative. The house, once a silent witness to her solitude, now echoed with the murmur of collective strength. As weeks passed, the gatherings grew in number and warmth. The women shared laughter and tears, recipes and remedies, fears and dreams. Lara became a quiet anchor in the group, her journey lending both empathy and hope. Together, they transformed the broken porch into a space of refuge, where worries could be spoken aloud and burdens lightened by shared understanding. The garden flourished alongside the group's spirit, its colors brightening with each passing day. Children's laughter sometimes spilled into the air, the promise of new life tangible in both the soil and the bonds forming between these women. Lara watched as friendships blossomed, the community's fabric mending thread by thread through acts of kindness and solidarity. The neighborhood itself began to shift. Neighbors who once passed with averted gaze now stopped to offer a smile or a helping hand. The house that had been a symbol of neglect was becoming a hub of hope, its walls bearing witness to transformation not just of space, but of lives intertwined. Lara's own strength grew in tandem with the garden's growth. The fears that had once threatened to overwhelm her softened under the weight of belonging and purpose. She found herself sharing stories from her own past, the losses and victories that shaped her resilience, creating a bridge for others to cross from isolation to connection. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and rose, the group gathered for a small celebration, a potluck of simple dishes shared beneath strings of salvaged lights. The house hummed with warmth and laughter, the air thick with the scent of herbs and fresh bread. Children played in the yard, their joy a balm to weary hearts. Lara stood quietly at the edge of the gathering, her hand resting gently on her belly. The life within stirred softly, a reminder of the journey still to come. Around her, the women's voices rose in song and story, a chorus of hope that wove through the night like a healing thread. The house, once a refuge from a storm, had become a sanctuary of community and care. Through shared struggles and small victories, Lara and the women had cultivated more than a garden. They had nurtured a family born not of blood, but of choice and compassion. As the evening deepened, Lara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer walked it alone. Surrounded by newfound friends and the promise of tomorrow, she embraced the fragile beauty of growth, both in the earth beneath her feet and in the hearts that had come together to heal. In the quiet moments before sleep, Lara whispered a vow to the night: to keep this place open, to nurture the bonds forged in hardship, and to carry forward the legacy of hope that had taken root in the most unexpected of places. The house, the garden, the community, they were her sanctuary, her strength, her future. Spring had unfurled fully by the time Lara stood in the garden, her hands pressed into the rich soil, the sun warming her back and the promise of growth all around her. The once neglected patch of earth had blossomed into a riot of colors: marigolds and daisies, herbs and vegetables, each plant a testament to resilience and care. The air was fragrant with the scent of blossoms and fresh earth, mingling with the laughter of children playing nearby and the low murmur of voices from the porch where women gathered in quiet conversation. The house behind her, battered but standing strong, had transformed alongside the garden. Fresh paint now adorned the walls, soft curtains fluttered in clean windows, and the small kitchen was filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals. It was no longer just a shelter, but a haven, a place where hope took root and flourished. Lara wiped her brow, feeling the swell of her belly beneath her shirt, a constant reminder of the new life she was nurturing. The journey from desperation to this moment had been arduous, marked by struggle and small triumphs. But now, she envisioned something greater than survival. She dreamed of a future where this house could serve as a sanctuary, not just for her, but for others who had faced the same shadows she once knew. In recent weeks, she had taken steps to secure that future. She applied for grants, reaching out to local nonprofits dedicated to supporting women in crisis pregnancies and homelessness. The process was daunting. Forms and interviews, hopeful letters and patient calls. But each effort was a seed planted toward sustainability. She met with community leaders, shared her story, and found allies who believed in the vision of a safe space born from hardship and healing. The house had been renamed The Haven, a name chosen with care, reflecting its purpose as a refuge and a place of strength. Flyers bearing the new name began to appear around the neighborhood and community centers, inviting women to find shelter, support, and understanding within its walls. Lara envisioned rooms prepared for mothers to rest, a small library filled with parenting resources, and a kitchen bustling with shared meals and laughter. The garden, too, was part of the plan. A source of fresh food and a space for healing, where women and children could connect with the earth and each other. Lara imagined workshops on gardening and cooking, moments of learning and growth that extended beyond the physical repairs of the house. It was a vision of community, empowerment, and renewal. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Funding was uncertain, and the demands of pregnancy grew heavier each day. Yet, Lara's resolve was unshaken. She leaned on the network of women who had gathered around her, the support group that had blossomed into a chosen family. Their shared strength buoyed her through weary nights and daunting days. One afternoon, as she sat at the kitchen table sorting through applications and brochures, there was a knock at the door. Opening it, Lara found a local social worker holding a folder, her expression warm and encouraging. "We've reviewed your proposal," she said. "There's interest in supporting the Haven. It's a promising start." Relief and hope surged through Lara's chest, a quiet triumph that rippled through her being. The road ahead would still be long, but the momentum was shifting. The dream was becoming tangible. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Lara stood in the garden with the women who had become her community, their hands dirty from tending the earth, their faces glowing with shared purpose. They spoke of plans and possibilities, of challenges met and victories won. The house behind them hummed with life and promise. Lara's thoughts drifted to the child she carried, the culmination of past sorrows, present strength, and future hope. She placed a hand gently on her belly, feeling the soft movements within, a reminder of the continuity of life and the power of nurturing love. As the stars began to emerge overhead, Lara looked around at the faces illuminated by lantern light and moon glow. The Haven was no longer just her dream. It was a living, breathing reality shaped by collective courage and compassion. In the quiet that followed, Lara whispered a vow to protect this sanctuary, to nurture its growth, and to keep its doors open wide for all who sought refuge. The journey from brokenness to hope had been long, but the legacy they were building was strong. rooted in kindness and the unyielding belief in new beginnings. With the garden blooming and the community growing, the haven stood as a beacon, a testament to the power of healing, resilience, and the transformative strength of chosen family. And Lara, once lost and alone, had become its heart, guiding it toward a future bright with possibility. The seasons shifted gently as the haven blossomed into a vital thread woven through the fabric of the neighborhood. What had begun as a fragile dream, nestled in a battered house, now thrived as a sanctuary, where women facing crisis pregnancies found not only shelter, but strength, community, and hope. Lara's vision had taken root and grew beyond her wildest expectations, fueled by determination and the collective spirit of those who had come together to rebuild not just their lives, but their community. Lara's days became a tapestry of advocacy and action. She had taken on a new role, not just as a mother-to-be, but as a fierce champion for women's rights, maternal care, and housing security. Her story, once one of quiet struggle, now echoed through local forums, nonprofit gatherings, and city council meetings. She spoke with a voice tempered by hardship, but strengthened by hope, sharing not only her journey, but the pressing realities faced by countless women in similar circumstances. At the Haven, the shelter grew busier with each passing week. Rooms once empty now welcomed expectant mothers seeking refuge from homelessness and fear. The small garden flourished under the care of the women and children, a symbol of renewal and resilience. Workshops filled the calendar, parenting classes, nutrition seminars, job training, all designed to empower and equip the women for the challenges ahead. Lara's advocacy extended beyond the walls of the Haven. She forged partnerships with local organizations, healthcare providers, and policymakers, pushing for systemic changes that would address the root causes of maternal homelessness and poverty. Her efforts helped bring attention to the gaps in social services and the need for comprehensive support networks. She became a familiar face at community meetings, her presence a testament to the power of lived experience transformed into activism. Despite the demands, Lara found moments of profound joy and fulfillment. Holding her newborn daughter Hope for the first time within the safe walls of the Haven was a triumph that transcended words. Hope's quiet breathing, the soft curve of her cheek against Lara's skin, embodied the very essence of the shelter's purpose. A beacon of life born from struggle, a promise fulfilled. The community that had once been wary now embraced the Haven as a vital asset. Neighbors volunteered, donated supplies, and welcomed the women and children with open arms. The shelter became a hub of healing, learning, and growth, where stories of pain were met with compassion and transformed into narratives of empowerment. Lara's journey also inspired a wider movement across the city. Other neighborhoods began to develop similar initiatives, drawing on the model of the Haven to create spaces of refuge and support for women in crisis. Lara was invited to speak at conferences and panels, her story a touchstone for those seeking to effect change. She remained humble yet resolute, always emphasizing the collective nature of the work and the importance of community. Amid the successes, challenges persisted. Funding remained a constant concern, and the emotional toll of advocacy weighed heavily. Yet Lara's resolve never wavered. She drew strength from the women she served, from the bonds forged in adversity, and from the knowledge that each step forward was a victory against a system that too often overlooked the most vulnerable. One afternoon, as Lara walked through the garden with Hope nestled in her arms, she paused to watch a group of women teaching their children to plant seeds. The laughter and chatter filled the air, a living symphony of renewal and hope. The garden was no longer just a patch of earth, but a symbol of transformation, of lives nurtured and futures cultivated. In that moment, Lara reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the despair that had once threatened to consume her, the storm that had battered her fragile refuge, and the community that had risen up around her. The haven was more than a shelter. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the profound impact of compassion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the garden and the shelter, Lara felt a deep sense of gratitude. The path ahead remained uncertain, but she faced it with courage and conviction, knowing that together they could continue to build a world where no woman faced pregnancy or homelessness alone. In the quiet of the evening, as Hope slept peacefully beside her, Lara whispered a vow to carry forward the legacy of care and kindness that had defined their journey. The story of the haven was still unfolding, a living testament to hope, transformation, and the power of community to change lives. The soft glow of morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm embrace over the now vibrant room. Lara cradled her newborn daughter, Hope, nestled gently against her chest, the tiny breaths rising and falling in a rhythm both fragile and steady. The house, once broken and silent, now thrummed with life and possibility. The echoes of past struggles transformed into a symphony of resilience and renewal. As she gazed down at Hope's delicate features, the soft curve of her cheek, the faint flutter of eyelashes, Lara's mind traced the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of despair, through storms both literal and metaphorical, to the sanctuary they had created together. The haven was no longer just a shelter. It was a beacon of hope for countless women who had walked paths similar to hers. The morning air carried the distant sounds of the neighborhood coming alive, the laughter of children, the murmur of voices, the hum of a city awakening. Outside the window, the garden flourished, its blossoms a vibrant testament to growth and new beginnings. Lara's heart swelled with gratitude, knowing that this place, born from hardship and nurtured by compassion, would continue to serve as a refuge for others seeking safety and belonging. In the quiet moments, Lara reflected on the pain and loss that had marked her past. The job lost, the isolation, the fear of the unknown. Yet, intertwined with those memories was the unyielding strength that had carried her forward. The kindness of strangers, the bonds forged in adversity, and the fierce love that now filled her arms. Her story was one of transformation, a testament to the power of hope and the human spirit's capacity to heal. As hope stirred softly, Lara whispered promises into the stillness, to protect, to nurture, to build a future filled with love and possibility. The weight of responsibility was immense, but so was the depth of her resolve. In this fragile new life, she saw not only her own redemption, but the legacy of care she hoped to pass on. The house, once a symbol of neglect, had become a home defined by choice and love. Its walls held the stories of those who had found refuge within, women who had faced despair and emerged stronger, bound by shared experiences and unwavering support. The haven was a living testament to the idea that family could be forged not by blood alone, but by compassion and commitment. Lara's gaze drifted to the calendar on the wall, marked with milestones and plans, a reflection of a future unfolding with intention and hope. The shelter's work continued beyond these walls, reaching into the community, inspiring change, and offering a hand to those still struggling. Each life touched was a thread in the fabric of resilience they wove together. In the quiet dawn, Lara felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long and arduous, marked by moments of doubt and despair, but also by courage and connection. She understood now that healing was not a destination, but a path, a continuous, evolving process shaped by love and perseverance. As the sun climbed higher, filling the room with light, Lara held hope close and made a silent vow to keep the haven open, to nurture its spirit, and to honor the strength of every woman and child who sought shelter within its embrace. Their stories, woven together, would continue to inspire and uplift, a beacon shining through the darkest nights. In that sacred space, surrounded by the quiet pulse of new life, Lara embraced the fullness of her journey. From despair to empowerment, from isolation to community, their story stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of unconditional love.